So Dominic, Preacher, you played the lead character. How did you get into the mind of someone as, I mean, would you call him a disturbed character?
Oh, I would call him a disturbed character, yeah. I suppose it's what I love. The complexities of that disturbed character is what I seeked in finding when I was looking for a script, and that was that script and that character that I wanted to portray. Getting into his headspace is been really hard. It wasn't. It didn't come naturally, and it was funny. And I've just been, because I've been talking about it today. I didn't get a huge amount from rereading the comics over and over again. I got a wealth of information and a very clear understanding of the landscape and the world in which that character exists. But I still had to piece together, with the help of Sam Catlin, the showrunner and writer, and Seth, as a director, Seth Rogen, who this person was and how often he changes from episode to episode. I think that's what makes him quite complex to portray. You see him as quite a dark, heavy, lethargic, rather depressed man at the beginning. By the end of that episode, he's got this new lease of life because this unknown entity has inhabited him, and he believes that he could probably achieve greatness and achieve what he set out to achieve, which is to help the people that his father used to look after, and to fulfill the promise he made to his father when he was young, and return home to nurture the flock that is Annville, the madness of Annville, the corrupt, poor, dying people of Annville, and he doesn't do a very good job of it.
You mentioned the world that he inhabits. I mean, how far removed is that from our world, and what kind of similarities and differences are there? Because that must make it quite hard to connect on certain levels.
From the world, in terms of the comic book world, or the world of Texas, Annville, of that world? Is that
I mean, how different are they? So the comic book world and the world, Texas itself.
Well, I don't know. From the world of Texas, comparatively to the world in which I know, is very, very different. And it's a tiny town in the middle of a landscape which is bigger than the country in which I grew up in. Yeah, the landscape of Texas, the scale of it, I think informs a character and a person who understands that world and that landscape. It's hard for me to even comprehend the size of where he's from. The landscape of the comic is so. I personally believe, and a lot of people ask, why was he writing about that particular part of America? And he's an Irishman, but he'd experienced a lot of time in America. I personally think it could be any small town anywhere, really. It's to do with I suppose a small congregation of people grouping around a church, but they're very. And what we uncover towards the end of the first season is why this particular patch of land is as corrupt as it is.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned being set in America, but a large number of the cast are British. So how did you work together in terms of getting into that psyche and that mindset?
Yeah, it helped. We didn't shoot in Texas. We shot in Albuquerque, in New Mexico, and I think that very much informed our perspective on the landscape itself. Is much more similar to the place in which we were meant to be, rather than if we were shooting in a city or in LA, for example. We went on little trips to small towns to kind of get an idea of the scale of the place. We had a lot of time for rehearsals, and we also we got a clear understanding of what it would be like to live in a place like that.
Mm-hmm. It's got a huge following, the comics, and a celebrity following as well in some cases. So were you surprised by how many people are into it, and given the subject matter?
Yeah, I was actually. I was amazed. I mean, well, I wasn't when I got to know them, because I read this as a script. That's what I saw it as, and then the more I looked into it, because it was sort of floating around and people kept mentioning it, so I got hold of a script, and then read up on it, then bits and pieces came together about the comics, then some imagery that I kind of remembered from my past came up, some very distinct characters. So then getting into the comic book themselves, I was completely engrossed and absorbed and couldn't stop reading them. And then knew I was embarking on this role, And then it became very apparent of how much it meant to people as a comic, and how, unlike anything else I've known, actually, it's a really particular. It's almost like a small group, not small, it's huge, but a group of people that when you mention it, when you see two people in a room who know it, they kind of have this a wink toward one another because they understand, and it is like that because there are characters in it which you would not see in anything else. It's unlike anything, and I never felt pressure. I did feel pressure, but I didn't feel obligated to replicate an idea of who that person is. I felt like we were all creating our own idea of these people and this comic, which was great to see Garth's reaction. He's the creator of the comic. When he came to set and saw how everything was built and saw things that had been in his imagination many years ago and saw what we were doing with our characters, he was ecstatic, and that meant a lot.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Seth's involvement as well, which, I mean, to be honest, from the outside, it seems quite surprising. So what was it like on set with him and his involvement?
So Seth and Evan, who make so much stuff together, they're constantly filming, but a lot of the time, more often than not, it's comedy. This has a lot of comedy in it, but it has a very dark side to it as well. It has many genres sort of are playing out before us when you see this. And I remember very clearly the first meeting with him and the producers and the writer. They were so animated and excited about what this could be and what direction this could go in, and you got a very clear interpretation immediately of what Seth and Evan wanted it to be. It's got a very particular style, and that tone. If they got that wrong, it wouldn't work at all. And I think that's what they've achieved so well. And on top of that, they were really great directors. And I thought maybe at times they might give differing notes, that they might there might be complications in what they both wanted from each actor, but they worked simultaneously and so well. And Seth's an actor, so his notes were very actor-led and very helpful for us as actors, because he knows what he'd find helpful.
Was there any hesitation on your part in doing this role, because you've done a comic book role before, and did you think there might be you might get typecast in that sort of role?
There's always that element, but again, I read it as a script, and that's all I could go on, and I had to just remind myself of that. I find it peculiar that I've ended up being in comic books and video game interpretations and things that I have to admit, didn't pay a great deal of attention to. So I find it peculiar that I am heavily featured in that world, and has been a high percentage of my work. But no, I didn't have any trepidation about that, because I just loved it as a piece of work, and I knew what it could be.
Mm-hmm. And this is on Amazon, which I think has opened up quite a few opportunities, this kind of format for watching and also making TV productions. Have you noticed that compared to some of the TV productions you made before, that this is more liberating in that sense?
Liberating I've never done anything. I've never done episodic television. I've never done anything more than 4 episodes long. So it was unlike anything I've ever done. I think how it opens up the landscape and possibility for characterization for the writer. It's why writers love working in it. They've got much more of a what do you call it? It's an art, a thing you paint on thing.
Canvas.
Much wider, bigger, broader canvas, which they can portray their ideas. And it's the same for an actor. This role. I mean, it was changing, and I was learning things about him, and I'm still excited to learn more about him and to continue playing him. And that's very different from a 2-hour movie or something, to playing for hours and hours the same character. And it's wonderful feeling completely immersed in it and the person you're portraying. It happens now very instinctively and very naturally, and that's a real pleasure to play out.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dominic.
Cool.
Cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey,